Before we dive into today's jaw-dropping true story, don't forget to subscribe to Brave Animals, the channel where loyalty, instincts, and four paws uncover what no human ever could. Hit that bell icon so you never miss a moment of courage, mystery, and life-saving truth. It started like any other Tuesday morning at Fairview Middle School, tucked between a quiet suburban neighborhood and a maple-lined park in rural Ohio. Kids filed in through the front entrance, chatting about pop, quizzes and pizza day, backpacks slung lazily over one shoulder, parents pulled off in minivans, teachers unlocked classrooms, and the smell of warm cafeteria biscuits drifted through the air. No one knew that by lunchtime the school would be evacuated, every hallway swarming with police and one student's name whispered in fear. And it all began with a bark, a sharp, loud bark that cut through the morning like a siren. Officer Brett Lane, 32, a former Marine turned school security liaison, was walking alongside his K-9 partner Briggs, a 6-year-old German Shepherd with a spotless record. They had been invited for a routine school safety check. Nothing more than a friendly demo to reassure parents and maybe give the kids a chance to pet a real police dog. But Briggs wasn't acting friendly. As the 7th graders lined up to enter the gymnasium, Briggs suddenly jerked his leash and lunged forward, snarling. His teeth clamped onto the bottom of a dark blue backpack worn by a quiet kid named Ethan Morales, yanking it so hard the boy nearly fell backward. The hallway froze. Students screamed. A teacher dropped her coffee. Ethan shouted in confusion, trying to pull away, but Briggs wouldn't let go. His growls deepened, pawing at the backpack like he was trying to dig through it. "Briggs, release!" Officer Lane barked, yanking the leash. Briggs hesitated but didn't release. His ears stayed pinned, his body low to the ground, every hair on his back raised like a brush fire. Lane's stomach sank. Briggs wasn't just reacting, he was alerting. "What is he doing?" asked Mrs. Taylor, the gym teacher, visibly shaken. Lane stepped forward, calm but firm. "Everyone step back, now." He unclipped the bag from Ethan's shoulders and laid it on the ground. Briggs immediately circled it, nose pressed against the zipper, barking relentlessly. "Sir, it's just my stuff," Ethan stammered. "Books and lunch, that's it, I swear." But Lane wasn't listening to Ethan. He was watching Briggs, and Briggs was trying to tell them something that couldn't wait. 10 minutes later, the school resource officer had called in backup. The bag had been carefully removed and placed inside a mobile containment box outside the school building. Students were kept inside classrooms while Officer Lane met with the principal and security team. Ethan sat in a small office near the front, nervously twisting the hem of his sweatshirt. His eyes were red but not defiant, just scared. Not the kind of scared someone gets when caught, but the kind that comes when you don't understand what's happening around you. "I didn't do anything wrong," he whispered to the counselor. "I really didn't." Meanwhile, Lane watched as the bomb squad's portable scanner examined the contents of the backpack. So far, nothing looked dangerous. Just books, a calculator, a bag of Cheetos, a water bottle, and one small, strangely wrapped item stuffed in the side pocket. "What's that?" asked one of the agents. Lane's eyes narrowed. It looked like an empty metal cylinder, maybe from an air freshener or soda can, but sealed with duct tape. Too small for a full explosive, but big enough to raise questions. Was this meant to go off? Or was someone just trying to scare someone? The agent shrugged. "Hard to say until we test it, but Briggs smelled something. And that's never random." Back inside the school, the rumors were already spiraling out of control. Some kids said Ethan had brought a bomb. Others swore they saw him whispering to an older student near the lockers earlier that morning. A few even claimed they had seen Ethan crying last week after being shoved into a locker by Kyle Jenkins, a kid with a history of suspensions and a bad attitude to match. Kyle hadn't been seen that morning. That detail didn't sit right with Lane. He returned to the security office and began checking the hallway camera feeds. What he found changed everything. At 7:43 a.m., just before the first bell, Kyle was seen handing something to Ethan. A rolled-up plastic bag quickly slipped into the side of Ethan's backpack. Ethan hadn't even looked inside. Kyle then walked straight out the front entrance. He never signed in. He never came back. Officer Lane stood in the hallway watching Briggs rest silently at his side. The shepherd's job was done, for now, but the human part of the investigation had only just begun, because the boy wasn't the villain, he was the decoy, and whoever set him up might have just planned something far worse than anyone imagined. Officer Brett Lane stood still in the dim security office, the glow of the monitor casting hard lines across his face. His jaw tightened as he replayed the footage again and again. Kyle Jenkins. Handoff. Plastic bag. Ethan accepting it, unaware. Kyle walking out of the school like he had never been there. Why would he do this, Lane muttered to himself. Why use a kid like Ethan? Behind him, Principal Douglas paced with a growing sense of urgency. We need answers fast. The superintendent's office is calling nonstop. Parents are panicking. Reporters are already outside the gate. Lane glanced at Briggs, who sat calmly at his feet, head resting between his front paws but eyes still alert. Let's get Ethan's statement, Lane said. He might not know what he was carrying, but someone picked him for a reason. In the counselor's office, Ethan's hoodie was now pulled tightly over his head, and his hands trembled slightly on his lap. Mrs. Whitaker, the school counselor, gave him a juice box and tried to keep her voice calm. No one's accusing you of doing anything wrong, Ethan. We just want to understand what happened this morning. Okay? The boy gave a tiny nod. Did Kyle give you anything today? Anything. At all? Ethan hesitated. I think so. He said it was just some tech stuff he forgot at home. He asked if I could keep it in my bag until lunch. I didn't look inside. I was scared to say no. Mrs. Whitaker gently pressed. Why were you scared? Ethan stared down. Because last week he pushed me into the lockers, called me a rat, said if I ever told on him again I'd regret it. That sentence hit Lane like a punch to the ribs. Kyle had a reputation, sure, but the school had been trying to give him a second chance, and now it seemed he had used that chance to rope an innocent kid into something far more dangerous. Lane stepped forward. Ethan, do you know where Kyle might have gone after he gave you the bag? I don't know, Ethan said. But I heard him say something yesterday about the gym stage, about making it memorable. I thought he was just messing around. The gym stage. That was where the district scholarship ceremony was supposed to take place the next day. Over 200 students, parents, faculty, and board members were expected to attend, including the mayor. Emergency meeting by noon, the school had been placed on full lockdown. The bomb squad was still analyzing. The suspicious object pulled from Ethan's bag, and a team was dispatched to sweep the gymnasium. Police units were deployed to search for Kyle Jenkins, who hadn't gone home, hadn't called in sick, and hadn't answered his phone since 7:44 a.m. Principal Douglas, visibly shaken, addressed the faculty in a closed meeting. We're canceling tomorrow's ceremony. We're alerting all parents. We can't afford to assume this was a prank. Officer Lane added, from what we've seen, Kyle knew exactly what he was doing. He planned to use Ethan as a carrier. He knew Briggs was scheduled for the safety demo today. He likely didn't expect the dog to get that close. Something scared him enough to bail. One of the teachers raised her hand. But what if he didn't? Bail? What if he's still around? No one spoke. But everyone thought the same thing. Kyle wasn't stupid. He was angry. He had motive. And now he had nothing to lose. The search for Kyle. That afternoon, Lane returned home for just an hour. He checked his own surveillance footage from his body cam to review Briggs's behavior that morning. It struck him how quickly and aggressively Briggs reacted the moment he smelled the bag. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Back at the station, dispatch had flagged a call that came from an abandoned property 3 blocks from the school, the old Maplewood Theater, shut down 5 years ago. A neighbor had reported seeing a teen breaking in through the side door that morning, carrying something heavy. Lane didn't wait. He loaded Briggs into the patrol SUV, called in backup, and sped toward the theater. At the Maplewood Theater, the building was cold and dark, filled with shattered glass and the scent of mildew. Lane moved carefully, flashlight scanning across broken seats and graffiti-covered walls. Briggs moved low and silent ahead of him, ears alert, tail rigid. Near the projection room, Briggs stopped suddenly. He let out one short bark. Lane followed, closely, and turned the corner. There, on a dusty bench, was Kyle's backpack. Inside it, a notebook, diagrams, floor plans of the school, specific notes on the auditorium stage, entry and exit times, and a list of names. Ethan's name was underlined twice. Lane let out a slow breath. This wasn't a scare tactic, this was a plan. The device in Ethan's bag may not have been active, but it was part of something bigger. Something that could have gone terribly wrong if not for Briggs. Back at the school that evening, Ethan sat with his mom in the now empty counselor's office. She held his hand tightly. "I don't understand how this happened," she whispered. "He just wanted to make friends." Mrs. Whitaker knelt beside Ethan. "You were brave to speak up. You didn't know what was going on, but you helped stop it." Ethan looked up. "Do you think Briggs knew I didn't mean to hurt anyone?" Lane stepped in. "Briggs doesn't make mistakes, Ethan. He just wanted you safe." The following morning at Fairview Middle School, the parking lot stayed empty. The welcome bell never rang. No lunch trays clattered. No sneakers squeaked in the gym. The building stood quiet behind locked gates and a line of orange barricades. Only a handful of faculty and law enforcement had access now, and they moved through the halls with a different kind of urgency. Not the usual school day bustle, but a careful, focused hum. Somewhere between fear and relief. Inside Principal Douglas's office, Officer Brett Lane laid the torn notebook across the table. Kyle Jenkins's name was scribbled on the front cover in fading black Sharpie, with the words, "Do not open," scrawled below it. That part Lane ignored. Across from him sat Ethan Morales, hunched into the seat like he wished he could disappear. Lane slid the book toward him. "I want you to see this." Ethan didn't move at first. Then slowly he reached out. He flipped past pages of rough doodles and crossed out class notes. Then his eyes caught something familiar. "Wait, that's me." On one page, a printed copy of a class schedule was taped in. Ethan's schedule, his locker number, lunch period, even a note in Kyle's handwriting. He's quiet. He won't ask questions. Doesn't talk to anyone. Ethan's hand started to shake. On the next page, there was a sketch of the auditorium. Red ink circled the back entry door. A sticky note was attached beside it. "Bag in. Detonator separate." Lane leaned forward, keeping his voice steady. "You were never the target, Ethan. But Kyle used you. He watched you, picked you, and made you part of something he didn't have the guts to carry himself. I didn't know. I swear. I didn't." "No, I believe you," Lane said. "So does Briggs." At that moment, Briggs sat in the corner of the room, tail thumping lightly against the floor. His presence was calm, grounding. Ethan looked over at the dog and whispered, "Thank you." That afternoon, after forensic teams finished analyzing the suspicious item found in Ethan's backpack, the results came in. It was real, not fully armed but partially constructed. A rudimentary homemade explosive that could have injured someone, or worse, if completed. The reason it didn't go off? There was no timer, no wiring. The plan hadn't been finished. Kyle had either panicked or intentionally delayed the setup. But there was no denying what he meant to do. By sunset, Lane sat outside the school in his cruiser, Briggs laying in the back seat. The air was cooling, and the town remained oddly quiet for a weekday. No basketball practice. No buses rumbling down Maple Avenue. Just silence and speculation. Lane sipped his coffee and replayed everything in his mind. Kyle had vanished. His phone was off. His parents claimed they hadn't seen him in over 24 hours. But something didn't add up. A kid like Kyle wouldn't just vanish. He'd want people to notice, to know what he tried to do. Lane tapped his finger against the wheel. "What are you waiting for, kid?" he muttered. Briggs suddenly stirred in the back seat, his ears perked, head lifting. Lane turned. A figure was approaching the cruiser. A boy, skinny, backpack slung low, dirty hoodie, sneakers scuffed from running, Ethan. Lane rolled the window down. You okay? Ethan nodded, then held something out. I found this in my locker. It was another note. Folded, dirty, written on loose-leaf paper. Lane opened it and read, I didn't mean for it to get this far. I just wanted to scare them. But now, I think I really messed up. There was no name, but Lane recognized the handwriting. It was Kyle's. Ethan looked terrified. Does this mean he's still here? Lane looked around, scanning the fading light. Or close enough to be watching. Later, that night, Lane called in a drone team. If Kyle had stayed nearby, he'd need supplies, shelter, somewhere familiar. And then it hit him. The gym. Not the auditorium where the ceremony was supposed to be, but the locker room beneath the gym floor. An old maintenance space, rarely used, no cameras installed. Kyle knew the school inside out. He had done his homework. Lane brought Briggs in on foot while backup formed a perimeter around the school. They slipped through the east hallway, their footsteps light against the polished floor. Briggs stayed close, his nose twitching. Then, at the stairwell behind the boys' locker room, Briggs stopped. He growled. Lane readied his flashlight and descended. At the bottom, a metal door stood slightly ajar. Inside, surrounded by dusty cleaning, supplies and a half-empty vending machine, sat Kyle Jenkins. He was curled up in a corner, arms wrapped around his knees, face buried. He didn't flinch when Lane stepped in. He didn't move when Briggs barked once, short and sharp. Only when Lane said, It's over, Kyle, did he lift his head. There were no tears, just a hollow look in his eyes. I wasn't going to do it, he said. I swear, I didn't even finish it. But you could have, Lane replied. And you dragged someone else into it. Kyle looked away. Ethan didn't deserve that. None of them did. I was so mad. At everyone, at everything. Lane nodded, then called it in. Kyle Jenkins was taken into custody quietly. There was no dramatic scene, no handcuffs in front of cameras, just a long, broken walk out the school's back entrance. Briggs followed close behind, never once taking his eyes off the boy. By the time Friday came around, Fairview Middle School had made national news. Headlines like, K9 Dog Prevents Potential School Tragedy and Hero Dog Briggs Saves Students from Hidden Threat were plastered across every screen. Aerial footage of the building, swarmed with police and marked by yellow caution tape, ran on cable news loops. Online, people debated fiercely. Some wanted tighter school security. Others blamed mental health. But nobody was talking about the two boys at the center of it all the way they should have been. They weren't just headlines. They were 14-year-olds, and their lives had changed forever. At home with Ethan, Morales had barely spoken since the incident. Not to the neighbors who knocked on the door with store-bought cookies. Not to the teachers who sent well-meaning emails. And not even to his mom, who had started sleeping in the armchair outside his room, just in case he woke up, in a panic again. But on Friday morning, Ethan did something different. He asked to go outside, just a short walk. Just to the end of the block and back. Mrs. Morales handed him a hoodie and followed a few paces behind, not wanting to push. When they reached the park bench near the corner, Ethan sat down quietly. I didn't do anything wrong, he said, at last. No, honey, you didn't, she answered. But they still look at me like I did. She didn't have an answer for that. That same night, a town hall meeting was called at the community center gym. The folding chairs filled quickly. Parents sat shoulder to shoulder, gripping coffee cups and clenching jawlines. Some were angry. Some were scared. Most were both. Principal Douglas stood at the microphone first. Her voice was calm, but there was weariness in her eyes. I want to thank Officer Lane and his K9 partner Briggs for acting quickly and preventing what could have been a tragedy. I also want to be clear. Ethan Morales is not under investigation. He is a victim in this too. A few murmurs of approval. A few skeptical looks. Then Officer Lane took the mic. Dressed in his uniform, Briggs sitting calmly by his side, Lane spoke with the kind of quiet weight that silenced the room. This wasn't about one bad kid, and it wasn't about one good dog. This was about paying attention to the signs. Kyle, Jenkins had been showing us for months that he was struggling. We all missed it. He paused. But you know who didn't miss it? Lane looked down at Briggs and then back at the crowd. This guy. Briggs didn't see a scared kid. He smelled danger. And because of that, we're all still here tonight. The crowd erupted into applause. Some stood up, others wiped tears. For a moment there was unity. But when the applause faded, a woman stood from the back row. My daughter goes to school with Ethan, she said. And she told me people are saying he helped bring the bomb. Mrs. Morales, seated near the front, stood up. That's not true. Maybe not, the woman said. But the rumors are already out there. What are we going to do to fix that? Silence followed. Everyone knew how fast misinformation could spread, especially among middle schoolers. Kids could be cruel without understanding how deep their words. Cut Lane leaned back into the mic. We talk about it. We tell our kids the truth. And we remind them that being quiet doesn't mean guilty. That weekend, Officer Lane pulled into the Morales driveway in an unmarked SUV. In the back seat, Briggs sat wagging his tail like he already knew why they were there. Ethan opened the door and immediately stepped back when he saw them, but Lane held up a hand and gave a gentle smile. No uniforms today. Just wanted to see how you were doing. Ethan glanced at his mom. She nodded. Briggs climbed out of the back seat and padded over to Ethan, ears perked. He gently bumped his nose into the boy's hand. Ethan's fingers curled slightly, then relaxed. He crouched down, and for the first time in days, he smiled. Lane sat beside them on the porch. You know, he said, dogs don't worry about what people say. They only respond to what's real. Ethan didn't say anything, but he nodded. Lane looked out toward the street. Principal Douglas is organizing a school assembly next week. Not just about safety, about truth and courage. I think it'd mean a lot if you were there. Ethan rubbed the fur behind Briggs's ears. I don't like being in front of people. I know, Lane said. But sometimes the quietest ones have the most important things to say. The following Thursday, Fairview reopened with extra security and a new sign out front that read, Welcome back. Fairview Strong. Inside the auditorium, the assembly filled with students, faculty, and parents. A low murmur buzzed through the crowd until the principal stepped onto the stage. She cleared her throat and spoke into the mic. We've been through a lot these past few days, and I want you to hear directly from someone who lived it. The lights dimmed slightly. Ethan walked out slowly, dressed in jeans and a button-up shirt, Briggs by his side. Gasps. Whispers. Then silence. Ethan stood at the mic, fidgeting. He glanced at Lane, who nodded. Then he spoke. My name is Ethan, and a lot of you probably think you know what happened, but I want to tell you what really happened. He told them about Kyle, about the bag, about how it felt to be scared and silent, and how a dog he'd never met saved his life. I didn't ask to be part of any of this, but now that I am, I want you to know. It's okay to speak up, even if your voice shakes, even if you're not sure anyone will listen. By the time he stepped away from the mic, the auditorium stood in applause. Not polite clapping. Real, emotional human applause, the kind that meant something. Kyle Jenkins sat in a gray-walled room across from a detective who had interviewed dozens of teenagers over the years. But none quite like Kyle. He didn't look angry. He didn't look scared. He just looked empty. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. No parents, no lawyer yet. Just the silence between questions. Detective Alvarez leaned forward, setting Kyle's notebook on the table. You gave that bag to Ethan. You watched him walk into school with it. Why? Kyle's eyes stayed fixed on the floor. His fingers picked at the sleeve of his hoodie. I didn't think it would go that far, he muttered. That's not an answer, Kyle. What were you trying to do? Kyle finally looked up. His voice was low, almost shaky. I wanted them to notice. Who's them? Kyle shrugged. Everyone. Teachers. Kids. My mom. Anyone. Alvarez sat back in his chair. He'd heard this before, but it never got easier. By Monday morning, Fairview felt different. Brighter, more alert. Students walked in through metal detectors for the first time. Security guards now stood at each entrance. It was all new, a bit unnerving, but it gave a sense of order no one knew they needed until it was gone. Ethan sat at his desk in homeroom, still processing everything. Kids didn't look at him the way they had last week. Some nodded, a few smiled. Most gave him space. He didn't mind. For now, space was good. Lunchtime, he noticed a familiar face in the cafeteria. Officer Lane walking down the hallway with Briggs trotting beside him. They stopped outside the gym and Lane waved him over. "Want to walk with us a bit?" Lane asked. Ethan hesitated, then stood. As they walked around the track outside the school, Lane told him something no one else had yet. Kyle's dad was a firefighter. Died in a building collapse 2 years ago. Ethan looked up, surprised. "I didn't know that. Most people don't." Kyle changed after that, started missing school, stopped talking in class, got into fights. "Didn't anyone help him?" "We tried. But he pushed everyone away, told counselors he was fine, told teachers to back off, told his mom he didn't care." Ethan looked down. "I guess I know what that feels like." Lane glanced at him. "You do?" "After my dad left, I didn't talk much either. I guess I just figured no one wanted to hear it." Briggs brushed his side against Ethan's leg as they walked, as if reminding him he wasn't invisible now. Lane continued. "Kyle wrote in his notebook that he didn't want to hurt anybody, but he wanted people to feel what he felt. Alone, scared, forgotten." Ethan stopped walking. "He didn't want to hurt me?" "I don't think he saw you, Ethan. Not really. He just saw a way to be heard." 2 days later, the community gathered for a closed juvenile hearing to determine Kyle's immediate future. It wasn't a criminal trial, not yet, but the stakes were high. Kyle's mom sat in the back row, her hands gripping a tissue so tight, it tore. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. When Kyle entered, still in juvenile custody sweats, a hush fell over the room. The judge, a calm woman in her 60s, reviewed the findings aloud. The device was real, though incomplete. The intent remains unclear. However, the defendant used another minor without consent, placing him at risk. This court considers that a severe breach of both safety and trust. Kyle didn't flinch. Then something happened. No one expected. The door opened at the back of the courtroom. Ethan walked in. Whispers fluttered through the benches. His mom followed, surprised but supportive. Ethan asked to speak. The judge allowed it. He stepped to the front, voice quiet but steady. "I just want to say that I don't hate Kyle." Gasps. Ethan continued. "I was scared. But I know what it feels like to go through stuff and not talk about it. And I don't think Kyle wanted to blow up the school. I think he just didn't know how to ask for help." The judge sat back in silence, her expression unreadable. Ethan turned to Kyle. "You made me feel small, like I didn't matter. But I think that's how you feel too. Maybe we both need to work on that." Kyle didn't respond, but his eyes welled up for the first time. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited behind barricades. Ethan didn't say anything to them. He just hugged his mom and leaned down to pet Briggs, who had come with Lane, sitting calmly like he always did. The judge's ruling came an hour later. Kyle would be placed in a juvenile rehabilitation program with mandatory therapy, family counseling, and regular evaluations. He wouldn't return to Fairview Middle School. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But he wouldn't be tried as an adult. Because sometimes justice is about rebuilding, not destroying. Back at school, a different kind of assembly. The following week, a new kind of assembly was held. Not in the auditorium, but outside on the soccer field. No fancy decorations, no performances, just a microphone and a folding chair. Principal Douglas stood before the student body and staff. "This isn't about punishment, this is about prevention and understanding. We've been through something heavy, but we're still standing. Together." Then she gestured toward the podium. Ethan stood up. Again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Officer Lane walked beside him, So did Briggs. Ethan stepped to the mic and said only this: "Everyone matters, even the quiet ones, even the ones who mess up. So let's not forget how to see each other." Then he stepped back, and nobody said a word for a long moment. They just listened. Briggs stood on the edge of the soccer field, his tail swaying gently, eyes scanning the crowd. He wasn't barking. He wasn't growling. But somehow, everyone there could feel his presence. To the students and staff at Fairview Middle School, Briggs wasn't just a canine anymore. He was the dog who saw what no one else did. It had been 3 weeks since that terrifying morning when his instincts led to the discovery of a dangerous object in Ethan's backpack. 3 weeks since the school shut down, since Ethan's life was flipped inside out, since Kyle Jenkins was taken into custody. In that time, something changed at Fairview. Not just the metal detectors at the door or the security cameras newly installed in every hallway. Something deeper. Students who had once sat alone at lunch now found empty seats being filled beside them. Teachers paused longer after asking if anyone needed help. Parents lingered a little more during morning drop-off. And the quiet ones, like Ethan, weren't as invisible as they used to be. The ceremony, it wasn't scheduled. There were no invitations. Just a spontaneous plan led by Principal Douglas and Officer Lane after students flooded the main office with letters. They wanted to honor Briggs, so that Monday afternoon, under the Ohio sun, hundreds gathered in the school's back field. There was no stage. No loudspeakers, just rows of students in folding chairs and a few homemade signs that read, "Thank you, Briggs," and "Our hero on 4 legs." Principal Douglas stepped forward with a microphone in hand. Today isn't about reliving what could have happened. It's about recognizing what didn't happen, because of one dog's courage and one community's willingness to face the truth. Then she looked toward Officer Lane. Lane stepped up, cleared his throat, and gave a small smile. "I've worked with Briggs for 4 years. We've done demos, we've tracked suspects, we've helped during emergencies, but I've never seen him react the way he did that day in the hallway. He knew, and he didn't hesitate." Briggs sat next to him, ears up, watching everything, as if he understood every word. "He saved a school," Lane continued. "But more than that, he changed it. He reminded us that real heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear fur and stand 4 feet tall." The crowd broke into applause. Some clapped, some cried. Briggs didn't move. He just looked around quietly, then leaned gently into Lane's leg. A moment for Ethan. When the crowd settled, Lane called up someone else. "Ethan, would you come up here?" Ethan Morales stood slowly from the 3rd row. He wore a clean collared shirt, sneakers, and an unsure expression. But he didn't hesitate. Not anymore. As he approached the mic, a hush fell over the field. He didn't speak long. "I didn't want to be known for what happened," he said, "but now I think I'm okay with it. Because if Briggs hadn't stopped me, something terrible could have happened, and I never would have known I was carrying it." He paused. "I used to think being quiet meant I didn't matter. But now I know. Sometimes quiet people just need a reason to speak. And a dog to show them when it's time." That earned the loudest applause of the day. Briggs wagged his tail. Later that evening, Officer Lane's journal back at home. Brett Lane sat on his porch with Briggs curled at his feet. The breeze was soft. The stars were starting to show. A cup of cold coffee rested beside him, untouched. He opened a leather-bound notebook and began writing. May 15th, Briggs received his 3rd medal today. First 2 were for takedowns. This one? For saving kids. I've never been more proud of him. Not just because of what he did, but because of what he changed. People are seeing each other differently now. The walls are thinner. It took a dog to remind us of the humanity we kept overlooking. Maybe we should listen more often. He closed the notebook and looked down at Briggs. "You? No," he said softly. "You didn't just save a school, buddy. You helped a boy find his voice." Briggs looked up, then rested his head on Lane's boot. Where they are now. Ethan was asked to join the Student Safety Committee. He agreed. He even started talking more in class, mostly about dogs and video games, but it was a start. Kyle remained in a juvenile rehabilitation program. No one tried to paint over what he did, but people stopped speaking about him in only whispers. Some even started writing letters to him. One of the first came from Ethan. It read, "I don't forgive what you did, but I understand why you did it, and I hope someone's listening to you now the way Briggs listened to me." Officer Lane and Briggs continued to serve the community, visiting schools, churches, even retirement homes. But something had changed in the way people approached them. Now they didn't just ask to pet the dog, they asked to thank him. Final scene. The school mural, 2 months later. A mural was unveiled in the main hallway of Fairview Middle School. It stretched across a full wall and showed Briggs mid-step, head high, walking down a painted hallway surrounded by the silhouettes of students. Above him, in bold letters, the words read, "Listen to the silence." Sometimes it's screaming. Below. It was a plaque, dedicated to Briggs, whose instincts saved lives, and to every student who ever thought they didn't matter. You do. As the students passed by it that morning, some stopped, some stared, some just smiled and walked on. But every now and then, one of them reached out and touched the fur on the wall. Not for good luck, not for attention, just to say thank you.